Hey students, welcome back to Buddy. Let's review chapter 21 notes. They started off at the shelter, but then they moved into their new apartment, which is in Mississippi. And Mrs. Watson is Little T's new teacher. So shelter life was miserable. Remember, the gang started to form. Little T kept thinking about Buddy. Grandpa T misses his wife who passed away. Daddy got a job. And the family moves into a very small apartment that has few trees. Okay, and little T starts to do school, and he feels out of place. He greatly misses Jamila and even J-Boy. I pick up a black pencil. I draw a dog. Then I draw water. So that's what little T draws when Mrs. Watson asks him to draw something that they could put into the Katrina book that the class is making. Okay, let's find out what life is like at Little T's school and with Grandpa T living in the new apartment. Chapter 22. The days pass. In the classroom, I sit at the desk. 3 of the other Katrina kids move back home before I even find out their names. The ones still left are from someplace else in Mississippi. The only boy is the one who turned around to look at me that first day. His name is Jerome. I find out he hardly ever talks. I find out the grinning girl is named Maddie. I find out there's 2 kids in my class who don't even speak English. I find out my teacher's going to call me Tyrone, no matter what. It's coming on October. Baby Terrell's giving Mama a fit about trying to climb in the cabinets. One day, we lose him and find him stuck up in the cooking pots. She's going around latching everything now. Can't get a glass of water without undoing a lock. One day, he gets out the front door and Mama nearly loses her mind. She looks out and he's rocking down the sidewalk like he knows where he's going. She starts screaming and I go running. When I catch him, he's grinning at me like he's proud. I don't fuss at him. I just snatch him up and carry him home. And think, I would like to do that too. Just walk out the front door and not come back. See, little T's thinking this, but he really can't express his feelings to his family members. He can't communicate how sad he is and how much he misses Buddy. Tanya's got about 100 new friends, plus a whole stack of new dolls. Everybody's giving them to her. She's got black dolls and white dolls. She's got dolls with hair and dolls without hair. She's got dolls in pink dresses, dolls in bathing suits, and dolls in nothing at all. She's naming them after all her new friends. Every night she kisses every one of them good night. It takes a long time. I lay in my bed and stare at the ceiling while she's kissing. Good night, Susie, she says. Good night, Keisha. Good night, Gaynell. Looks like everybody's getting happy except me. And maybe Grandpa T. He fixes all the hinges. He takes all the doors down and oils them and sands them and puts them back up. I help him some on a Saturday. Then he crawls in the kitchen cabinets and puts down new paper all the way to the black corners. He takes apart the stroller somebody gave us and puts it back together again so it rolls twice as good. He looks around and there ain't nothing else to do. So he's fixed everything in the new apartment and now Grandpa T doesn't feel useful or there's nothing really left for him to do. So he sits in the dark and watches the TV. When I go to school, he's watching the TV. When I come home, he's watching it. When I go to bed, he's still watching it. I ask him what he's watching. He lifts up his hand and says, "This here show," and that's all. Sometimes it's about animals in the jungle. Sometimes it's about a war somewhere. Mostly, it's just people acting stupid. Mama stands in the kitchen and wipes her hands on a dish rag. Are you still watching that TV, Grandpa T? She says. He nods and she shakes her head. It's not right, she says. It's just not right. I sit on my bed and do my homework and learn all my games by heart. I beat every level. I start over. So Grandpa T is watching TV and little T feels alone. And what does he do? Kind of just plays with his Game Boy. One night at supper seems like everybody's talking at once. Daddy says they're trying out a new way to keep the pine tree resin from gumming up the chainsaws. Mama says she's thinking about making some pralines for the bake sale they're having for Tanya's class. Tanya says there's a girl in her class who has hair so long, sometimes she sits on it. Baby Terrell reaches over and grabs one of Tanya's ponytails, and Tanya screams. When Mama makes him let go, he starts banging his spoon. I'm thinking, I want to bang a spoon. I'm thinking, I want everybody to just shut up. Do you see how little T's thinking these things? He's not expressing it. He's not articulating any of this. He wants to leave right out the front door like Baby Terrell. He wants to bang a spoon like Baby Terrell, but he's keeping all of his feelings inside. Then, I can't help it. All of a sudden, I stand up. I turn around and go in my room and slam the door. Everybody sitting at the table gets real quiet. I hear somebody's chair scrape against the floor. I hear my door open and I flop over fast so I'm facing the wall. Son? It's Daddy's voice. Leave me alone, I yell. I pull my pillow over my head as quick as I can and wait for the smack. Because little T and his family would get punished just for abruptly leaving the dinner table, wanting everyone to shut up. My room is quiet and I'm waiting. I hear Daddy breathing. Then I hear the door close real easy and the voices start up again at the table. I squeeze my hands into fists and I hit my pillow over and over again until I'm finally too tired to move at all. And that's just another example. Little T cannot express how he's feeling. Don't nobody knock on my door or come in my room for a long time. I lay there in the dark and listen to them clean up the kitchen. When the TV goes on, I hear my door open. The light flips on. I turn over, and there's Grandpa T. Are you going to lay there like a bump on a log for the rest of your life? I don't say nothing. He sits down on Tanya's bed. I must be getting old, he says. I'm always tired. I'm tired too. You're young. You ain't got nothing to be tired about. Sit up. I lift myself up on my elbows. That ain't sitting up. I swing my legs over the side of the bed and sit on the edge. Is this high enough? Watch your lip. He's holding his box of pictures. He hands it to me. Open it. There's only a handful of pictures inside. They're all of one woman. You ain't never seen her in person, he says. Your grandmama passed before your time, but you could see she's the most beautiful woman in the world. I look at her. She's pretty, all right, but she's not the most beautiful woman in the world. Her name was Alice, he says. I know that, I say, and she could sing like a bird. I've heard that too. Everybody says Tanya's going to sing like that someday. Did I ever tell you how I met her? He says. I'm thinking, probably, but I don't say nothing. It was Sunday morning, the 30th of July, 1961. Here comes the story, I'm thinking, and I sit back. I was finally out of the army and back home in Mississippi, he says. My pockets were full of money. I bought me a 1959 Cadillac. I was driving right smack through the middle of town, this very town we're in now. He shakes his head. You should have seen it then. There weren't more than 5 or 6 stoplights and some railroad tracks. Now you can't get across town in less than a half an hour. He stops and I wait. So I've got the windows rolled down. He starts up again. And I'm passing by the church. I hear them singing and I decide to go inside. Turns out every seat is full. I'm standing in the back, holding my hat and wondering how to sneak out when this girl, he looks me up and down, this girl, not too much older than you are now, well, she stands up and starts to sing. And Grandpa T closes his eyes and raises his hands beside his face. My heart lifts up, he says. My heart lifts up on the wings of song. He's swaying back and forth real slow, like he's listening to something. Then his eyes pop open and he looks at me again. When I leave out of that church, little T, he says, I'm so in love. I swear I'm going to marry that girl if I have to wait 100 years. He looks down at the picture for a minute. He's smiling. Of course, I had to wait for her to grow up first. I moved on down to New Orleans for a job, and before you know it, I was playing the fool. You name it, I did it. I was spending all my money on foolishness. I got the sharpest clothes. I got the sharpest car. He stops talking and looks at me hard, his eyes squinching up just a little. I ain't going to tell you about the other stuff. You ain't old enough, and your mama would kill me. He shakes his head. He says, Then he keeps on going. But even with all that craziness, every Sunday morning, I drove that old car up to Mississippi, and I listened to her sing in the church, and I tried to get her to notice me. He draws a deep breath. It didn't work. Even when she got old enough, she wouldn't give me the time of day. I would speak to her at church. I'd pass by her house in the afternoon. I even wrote her some letters. One day, she finally gave me the lowdown. She said she heard all about me. She said she'd heard I didn't have the sense I was born with. She said she had better things planned for her life than passing time with me. I remembered that like it was yesterday. She was sitting there as sweet and polite as can be. Then she looked up and shot me dead with those words. I jumped in that car and I went spinning out of her driveway and barreling down the road. It was getting dark and I was somewhere in the woods halfway home when the car just started going slower and slower, and then it stopped. Little G, I was out of gas. That needle was sitting right on top of that big red E. Empty. I started cussing. That car wasn't going nowhere soon, but I was still jerking at the steering wheel and banging on it and yelling at the top of my lungs. Grandpa T stops talking. He's just sitting there, his mouth closed and his head nodding slightly. Then he looks at me, looking at him. All of a sudden, I stopped, he says. I wiped my face and I sat there holding on to the steering wheel and looking out at the darkness all around me. And I thought to myself, Tyrone Elijah Roberts, is this how you want to live your life? And right then, everything changed. I can't explain it. I just know what happened. I'm a man, I thought, and men don't act like I've been acting. Men take things on their shoulders and carry them. And so I picked up my load right then, right there, and I started carrying it. So basically what that means, students, is he took responsibility for his life. He stopped with the foolishness and spending money on fancy things and partying and being silly, because he was very interested in this woman who sings at the church, and she didn't want to have anything to do with Grandpa T if he wasn't going to be a responsible man, a husband that she could rely on someday. So he says, and so I picked up my load right then, right there, and I started carrying it. When I got back to New Orleans, I stopped all my foolishness. I saved my money, and 2 years later, I bought a house, the very one that just got flooded. 6 months after that, I carried your grandmama over the threshold. She was wearing a white wedding dress she made herself and a little round hat stuck on with bobby pins. She passed just before your daddy got married. How come you all only had daddy? Little T's wondering why only one child. That was God's plan. He ain't looking at the pictures anymore. He ain't looking at anything. I miss your grandmama, he said. I miss her every day. She was the most beautiful woman in the world, and she could sing like a bird. We just sit there for a while, looking at the wall. Why did you tell me that story, Grandpa T? He stands up and puts the pictures back in the box. It's time for you to pick up your load, son. I ain't a man, Grandpa T. You're close, he says. You're getting awful close. Okay? So, Grandpa T, once again, he's little T's friend or companion, and he steps in the room to comfort little T, but also to give him some advice, to give him some wisdom, to tell him he needs to step up and just deal with whatever he's going through with Buddy. Little T says he's not ready yet to do that. And we learn that Grandpa really misses, his wife. Let's go into the notes. So it takes place first in Little T's school with Mrs. Watson and the other children and the apartment. Little T is not enjoying his new school and he's unhappy. Grandpa T is unhappy and is experiencing despair. He watches TV all day long and doesn't engage in meaningful conversations with anyone until he talks to Little T. Little T wishes he can run away and bang a spoon like baby Terrell. Grandpa T tries to comfort Little T. He shares stories with him about his grandmother. Grandpa T loved his wife very much. Grandpa T's getting sentimental and perhaps depressed and too tired. Grandpa T tells Little T that he has to pick up his load and become a man. We have some conflict here, and it's internal. It's inside. It's not between one person and another character or one person and the force of nature like a hurricane. Little T is finding difficulty with expressing his feelings. He can't verbally articulate that he misses Buddy and is wondering if he's alive. So it's between Little T and his brain and his heart, and it's like this conflict. It's a problem because he can't speak it, right? He wishes he could bang on a spoon. He wishes he can walk out the door. He's punching his pillows. He can't articulate. He can't clearly express his feelings or his emotions. He can't speak. And sometimes when you're so very sad or you have so much grief, sometimes you do clam up and you shut down and you can't speak, right? And that's how some people, are. Sometimes then you can write in a journal or pray or, whatever, maybe take a walk. But at this point, Little T, he can't express himself. So I want you to go back to the recording, or I dropped a lot of hints, using 3T 3 details from the text from this chapter explain how little t is unable to verbally articulate that he misses Buddy. How come he can't express it? And give 3 details from the text. Okay, so detail 1, detail 2, detail 3. Okay, ciao for now. See you when we Zoom next. Bye.